quick. Let me just get the link going. We're going to look at the Ringers NBA draft guide here. I got it up now. Sorry. Okay. And here is the big board from Kevin O'Connor. So I figure what we do, Ethan, is we just kind of go through the top 12, 15 players on this, just to not like super in depth, but just go through them, kind of read a little bit of what Kevin O'Connor has to say. And then just so we can kind of get an idea of the potential people that the Spurs may be drafting.
Got it. Let's do it.
All right. So we'll start with Stefon Castle, who Kevin O'Connor has as the number one player on his big board in the draft. Alexander Sarr, as you can see down here, he's been at number one in a lot of other places for most of the year. But after March Madness, Stefon Castle kind of took the reins here on the Ringers big board, at least. You can see the shades of Markelle Fultz, Anthony Black. He's described as a jumbo-sized guard who can do it all and could have superstar upside if his jumper improves. So isn't that a template for a lot of people on the Spurs roster? No, all jokes aside, just to read some of the stuff that they have here, he says, got that dog in him, hustle, on-ball defense, feel for the game, and probably will be 20 by the time that the season starts next year at 6'6", 190. How much of Stefon Castle have you seen, Ethan?
Literally nothing.
Okay. Well, from what I've seen from him, Kevin O'Connor basically he describes this pretty spot on. The shooting is really the main thing, and that's why he gets the Markelle Fultz and Anthony Black comparisons. With that being said, I think he is a very connective player, and he's really basically good at everything else other than shooting. And as much as that is something that the Spurs have been focusing on going into next year when it comes to improving it, that shooting, if we were to get Stefon Castle anywhere in the top 3, I would be completely fine with it. And I see some comments, people are not liking it, blah, blah, blah. But in comparison to some of the other guards this year, not to say that there aren't some other good ones, I think Stefon Castle would add another element of just a dynamic potential all-star level player at the guard position that we need. And he's still good in the midi. And I don't think that his shooting is completely unmendable, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, I think there's a world where he can become a solid 3-point shooter. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah.
To me, the thing we need to draft for most is defense, personally. I know we think shooting because of Wembanyama, but we are the worst defense in the league, especially when Wembanyama is not playing. Trey Jones, as much as I've loved him, as much as he has taken strides, is not the best defender. So for a Stefon Castle to come in and fix that situation, that would be huge for us. And just individual players that can defend and not have to rely so much on Wembanyama being behind him.
Yeah, and he can play make, like him in the pick and roll with Wemby. He's going to be able to do things. I mean, I know that's not super descriptive, but a lot of it's just on the screen right now. I'll just read the first paragraph of his pluses. High field playmaker who controls tempo by playing at his own pace. He'll change rhythm and can decelerate with ease, showing excellent body control and footwork on drives. With great size and strength, he can plow through defenders too. Makes the simple play with skip passes, kickoffs, and interior feeds. Think about those skills in a pick and roll with Wemby, Ethan. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah. And the last thing you mentioned is defense. That's the thing when I've watched him that stuck out the most to me. We know the Spurs love that. And he's won 2 straight national championships. He's a winner as well.
Love that.
But let's move on to Alexander Sarr. Shades of Jaren Jackson Jr., Jonathan Isaac. We talked about Jaren Jackson Jr. and, kind of their comp. Obviously, he's taller, has a bigger wingspan than Jaren Jackson, but we kind of talked about that in a recent episode. And then Jonathan Isaac, I like that one too. And that's why he says shades, because obviously Jonathan Isaac and Jaren Jackson Jr. are very different players whenever it comes to like one being has Jaren Jackson gone to an All-Star game yet?
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
once I think.
Yeah, but not this year. But still an all-star level 4 and then kind of a guy who's more of a role player. But still they throw in Jonathan Isaac because he's a little bit bigger than Jaren Jackson Jr. It's kind of like Jaren Jackson Jr. with Jonathan Isaac's size. Not to
Mm,
just talk about them the whole time, even with those being the only two comps up there. But regardless of that, um, his defensive potential, the way that he can still stretch the floor, people can question shooting percentage, but I think it's kind of a similar case with Victor last year. Like Cassie, they say this year in Perth, he's shooting just 29.5% from three and 61% from the line, which is about what he averaged at Overtime Elite the year before, too. He doesn't have much touch away from the basket either. So shooting efficiently from three may just not be in the cards. From what I watched this year, and maybe I'll end up being wrong, Ethan, I just disagree with that. Um, I think if you give him some open looks in the pick and pop, he's going to be a pretty solid shooter. I know the numbers aren't that great, but neither were Victor's.
mm.
I think when you watch the tape, he's definitely got a solid jump shot. Not to say that there's not room for improvement there, but I think that there's a reason why he put Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jonathan Isaac. Like both of those guys can still stretch the floor. Um, but on top of that, his defensive versatility at the Perth lists him at 7'1". This says 6'11". Regardless, he's around 7 feet tall. But he's also, not the heaviest guy either. So he's someone who can play the 4 or the 5. I see, obviously, if the Spurs were to pick him, he's going to play more of the 4. Um, but there's a lot of things in his game that I think translate to the modern NBA.
The only thing I'll disagree with you on is I think he might be a better 5 than a 4, and
Okay.
let Wemby operate as a stretch 4, kind of how we had him with Zach this year. And I think that Alexander Sarr as a Jaren Jackson Jr. type center defender with Wemby roaming as a help defender is stronger than vice versa, if that makes sense.
I get what you're saying. I think I disagree there. And that's also because of what we've seen this year. And I know Zach Collins is very different. We talked about this in the last episode too, where we played Zach next to Victor for a little bit, and it still just didn't it didn't
Hmm.
look very good. And obviously Zach is kind of a big asterisk there, but I think this season we've kind of learned that we can get the most out of Victor when he's playing the 5. Now, maybe you did use this example in our last conversation talking about Bam Adebayo and Jaren Jackson and how maybe switchable guys and mobile guys like that would be able to make him playing the 4 more of a possibility. So I do see the train of thought there.
Hmm.
Um, but I personally, just me, would see him more as a 4 on the Spurs. But I could be proven wrong because he does have a lot of rim protection ability. When you look at his tape on the Perth Wildcats, he's definitely dominating the paint. So it's not that I don't think he has that in his skill set. I just feel like Victor, what we've seen from him in that same kind of scenario, um, it's just a higher upside, and that's just because he's Victor. Like Victor's going to have a higher upside than a lot of players in a lot of different categories.
Completely understandable, which is why he's actually not one of my favorite guys to draft, because I honestly don't think it would fit that well with the
Hmm.
pair of them. Now he would be a major upgrade if we wanted to play him at the backup center instead of Zach Collins. But
Hmm.
if push came to shove, I would venture toward other players. But Jude, I'm going to have to go for 2 minutes because I
Go
now
for
have
it.
to use the restroom. So excuse me for a moment.
No, go do it. Alrighty, y'all. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pause this and just look at some of the comments we have in here. And we're going to go through the rest of that big board here in a second. I'll probably speed it up when Ethan gets back a little bit because we've already been on for an hour and a half and we still have some other stuff that we want to get to because it's finally the off season. But let me go ahead and get to some of y'all's comments. So Brandon Vela says Stefon Castle reminds me of Jimmy Butler coming out of college, to be honest. That's interesting because Jimmy Butler was a second round pick, but with their play style and the similarities there, I can totally see what you're saying. Um, and I don't think Marquette is in the same conference as UConn. Maybe it is. UConn, I think, is still in the Big East for basketball. I could be wrong there, but regardless, kind of, schools that aren't necessarily big name schools in other sports, but they're very good in basketball, like UConn and Marquette. Let's see what Victor says here. Castle's potential is higher than Reed, Sheppard, Rob Dillingham, etc. Only other point guard I see with a higher ceiling than Stefon Castle is Nikola Topic. Interesting. Interesting. I definitely agree on the Reed Sheppard point. I like Rob Dillingham a lot. I know there's some questions with his game, but I think bringing in a bucket getting point guard with the skills that he has and the off the dribble isolation ability off the bounce that he has, I think that would just add a different dynamic to our offense. Now, he does have some defensive questions, and we did see his playmaking improve a little bit throughout, at least I say a little bit. The stats aren't going to jump at you, but throughout the season, you saw Rob Dillingham's playmaking get better. But still, he was, mainly an off the dribble scorer. I like that first just because we only really have Devin, and I think that the Spurs can hone the what's the word? Ethan, are you on here?
Oh yeah, can you see me?
There you go. Now I can see you.
I'm
I was
lurking.
just I was just talking about Rob Dillingham a little bit because this comment, he says, Victor says Castle's potential is higher than Reed Sheppard, Rob Dillingham, etc. And the only other person that he sees having a higher ceiling than Stefon Castle at guard is Nikola Topic. And I was just kind of saying that I think I definitely agree with him on Reed Sheppard, but I think that there may be a chance that Rob Dillingham might have a similar or even higher, but really what I'm going for here is maybe just a similar potential to Stefon Castle. Honestly, Rob Dillingham and Stefon Castle are kind of like inverted prospects. Like not necessarily in size and stature, but in play style. Like Castle needs to get better at, well, the off the dribble scoring he has kind of off like in the mid range and driving to the basket. But still, just for the sake of this conversation, they're kind of inverted in the sense that Rob Dillingham is a solid shooter, can score off the dribble, and can score kind of similar to Devin when it comes to like the step back jumpers and whatnot. And just needs to improve on his playmaking and his defense. Where Castle's already there, but needs to improve on his shooting. But still, I would agree that Castle is the most proven guard in the class, which is why he's number one. But regardless of that, Ethan, do you want to get back to this big board?
Let's do it. I do have to mention one thing before I forget.
Go ahead.
My boss, Mike Engel, says hello. He wanted me to tell you that specifically. I know he
Here he
commented,
is.
but
He's here in the comments. He says, "Can't believe I'm late." Well, first of all, hello, Michael. Thank you for saying hi. And then he says, "Is the season really over? Triathlon just started, or triathlon season just started." Well, there you go. The guys need to get in triathlons to get in their conditioning, right, Ethan?
right on. I couldn't agree more.
Okay. I did tell the people while you were gone, Ethan, I'm going to try to speed this up just a little
Okay.
bit because we do have some other stuff to get to.
I'm
Um,
hungies.
me too. I am too. I ain't gonna lie. And I've got some pizzas waiting for me.
Ooh.
But okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're not gonna open up the other stuff. We're just gonna do the shades of
Mm.
Donovan Clingan at number 3. This was when you asked me about Edie. I said I felt like I would rather have him, but he's probably gonna be too high. It's kind of crazy that he's this high up for Kevin O'Connor. I probably need to watch more of him. But to be honest, I know this says shades of Roy Hibbert.
Goat.
Here's what I think is going on here, Ethan. This is Walker Kessler, but people are realizing he's Walker Kessler, so they're going to pick him
Mm-hmm.
higher.
That's probably a really good point. It's a
Like
really good point.
he might have some more, and I need to watch him more. So y'all can correct me in the comments. And as you can see, interior scoring, right? I think he may have a little bit more of an offensive game than Walker does. But at the same time, I think that's a very apt comparison. 7'2", 280, shot blocking, rebounding, off ball defense. And even when they say off ball defense, I don't think they're necessarily referring to his movement. I think they're just referring to him as a guy kind of like, similar to Wemby, not to this extent, but guys will, drive towards him and then maybe make a pass or decide to drive around him and extend the play.
Right. Mm. I'll take that. Backup center. Why not?
I wouldn't hate it either. And I'm kind of going off my point here because I just said like, and I want to stick to that. Victor needs to play center, but we do need an upgrade at backup center,
We
and
do.
this would be really nice to have on a rookie contract.
If we get like Toronto's pick at 7, 8, and he's available, and we take him, I'm not going to be mad at all if he's exactly what this is telling me that he is. But something tells me he won't be available at that point.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but I'm looking at this, Ethan, and I'm just like, man, this is exactly what we need off the bench at center.
Yeah, right.
It's just all the things Zach's like struggles with,
Give me
unfortunately.
Big Roy.
Okay, Nikola Topic. I like this. Shades of Goran Dragic, not Nikola Jokic or Nikola Jovic, but crafty shot creator who jitterbugs around the floor to generate
Jitterbugs.
buckets. He had a game also where I believe he scored 50 in Serbia. So I understand why Victor earlier said that he feels like Topic might potentially have a higher ceiling than Castle. I think it's just because he's playing in the Serbian league.
Mm.
That's really the only question mark with Topic, IMO.
I haven't gotten into his highlight reel, to be honest with you. I just know what other people are saying as like the next Luka Doncic because he's a foreign point guard with size.
Okay. I from what I have seen, I haven't watched him in a while, but when I first heard of him, I went on a little bit of a research YouTube rabbit hole, if you will. Um, it once again, I'm not trying to repeat myself, but it just really all depends on like whether it's going to translate from the Serbian league. Because if the stuff that he's doing translates from the Serbian league, um, it's going to be he'll be a really really good point guard. Like not, I don't think that he's going to be Luka, but I think that he could be like. There's a reason why he has him number 4 on the big board, and I think he could be a top 5 talent in a draft if everything translates.
Right. We'll see. I mean,
I
the Spurs are the goats with foreign players, so
except Lucas Omanic.
except Lucas. Well, he beat Houston the other night.
I was gonna say maybe it's just Will Hardy. Anyways, um, here's what I'll say. We're gonna get down to our boy Reed Sheppard here, and I know a lot of people like Reed Sheppard, and I don't want to crap on him too much, but like Topic is like way like way better Reed Sheppard. That's like
Way better.
I would so much rather take Nikola Topic than Reed Sheppard. And I feel bad saying that about Reed Sheppard because he would school me in basketball like in so many different ways, not just like on the floor, but probably some IQ stuff too. You know what I mean? He could probably come on and do this show better than I could if we're just being completely bluntly honest because of his basketball knowledge. I don't know that maybe he's not as entertaining. I could maybe go for that. But I think that Nikola Topic, like I said, I would like him a lot more than Reed Sheppard. But getting to Matas Buzelis, Ethan, he is someone who kind of coming into the year I thought was going to be a 4, but as I watched him more, he's somebody who could definitely play the 3. And if we did end up picking him, I think he's a plug and play guy where he takes Julian's spot.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. You said that about Matas Buzelis?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. 1000%. And one of the comps I saw for him that's actually not the one that's up there is Franz Wagner. And I think that's actually a really apt comparison as well because similar size and I think brings pretty much everything to the game. Like doesn't have really that many weaknesses, especially offensively, just kind of does everything that you need him to do. Um, how is he as a shooter, Jude? Is he knocking down consistently?
Pretty solid. Let's go ahead and look at his percentages. Yeah. Final season of high school made 43%. He's back below 30% during the G League season, but okay. The Ignite literally got canceled because of this season. Like if you go watch him, there are games in the G League this year where he's shooting very well from 3 and catches fire. I just think that once Ron Holland got hurt, everyone just doubled him every game. And that's why Ignite was 2-19 and Adam Silver literally canceled it. So
Mm,
I'm not trying to make that like the complete excuse for his numbers being low, but the context of the situation matters.
for sure. And that's something that he can probably get way better at too, even if it is just slightly inconsistent. Because, like I said, everything else, that's what he does.
There's a reason he says connective playmaker with size, shooting, and the ability to play anywhere on the floor.
Right.
You're not going to be able to play anywhere on the floor if you can't shoot. You know what I'm saying?
1,000%.
Yeah. So y'all go look at Ignite's record, and then when Ron Holland, who was supposed to be the highest rated prospect on the team, is out for the year, they were
Mm,
just double teaming Buzelis. Like I watched even against the Austin Spurs, they're just double teaming him every game, and then it's like, what is he supposed to do? Anyways,
mm.
I feel bad for him in that situation. The fact he played out this year, good for him. But then we've got Dalton Knecht at number 6. I'm glad he's above Reed Sheppard too. And this is not to make this like, because look at Reed Sheppard. He's shades of Derek White. Like, I should love him. He really does fit all the Spurs qualities. I'm just not sure if athletically he's going to translate. Like, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do the stuff that he did in college when there's 5 other NBA players on the floor. That's my biggest question with Reed Sheppard, but I get why he's a top 7 player. Dalton Knecht, on the other hand, because of his size, and yes, he's an older player. There's a reason though that at his age he's a top 10 player on this big board. And I know you may see KCP
I
Max
love
Strus.
KCP.
How is he number 6? He's gonna, I mean, he's gonna come in as a 23-year-old, and he's gonna already be developed. Movement shooter, pull up threat, clutch gene, off ball defense, on ball defense. I would not be mad. He's somebody I think could also be a plug and play for Julian as well. And even though you probably see him as a little bit more of a 2, at 6'6", he can still play the 3. I would not mind taking him at all, even though he's a little bit older whenever it comes to the timeline.
There are types of players that I will spend an arm and a leg on, and if he's anything remotely similar to Contavious Caldwell Pope,
He has a higher ceiling.
I'll take him with the number 1 overall pick. I love Contavious Caldwell Pope, so you've sold him on Ethan Quintero, that's for sure.
I love that, Ethan. But Dalton Knecht, like all the appeal that people talk about with Reed Sheppard, I think he has the same, but it's going to translate better. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. We'll
Mm.
see.
Look, I personally don't like, especially in this era, small guards, especially if they're not going to be super hyper athletic. So if that's what he is, then I'm not a fan of
Exactly.
that pick either. Unless with our odds, I'm knocking on wood, because with our luck, Jude, he's going to be the next John Stockton and get 3,000 career assists or whatever it is, and we're just going to be like, oh man,
Oh my gosh. You know who I do like from Kentucky who's a guard, Ethan?
Rob Dillingham.
Very much so. I have him above Reed Sheppard personally, and I might even have him a little bit higher up in this big board. But I will say Kevin O'Connor knows more than I do and has been doing
Mm,
this way longer. I think he has a higher potential than Lou Williams or Bones Highland. With that being said, he does have shades of both of them in their game. Off the dribble score, ball handling, you see the float games up there. The
mhm.
things that he needs to improve on, first of all, we saw flashes of his playmaking improve this year, and then defensively. Um, but I don't necessarily think that he's like a potato defensively. Because here we go, active but erratic defender. I think that's a great way to describe it. Too often falls out of position by getting handsy, lost, or simply not understanding what his opponent is doing. His fundamentals need to dramatically improve because there's no way to solve his lack of size. Um, with that being said, I think the fundamentals that does tie a little bit in to overtime elite. If you've watched any of those games, you know that is very much a. I don't want to take away from it because they've been sending guys to the NBA, and now they're going to be the main person to do that with
Mhm,
with G League Ignite going, and they're still surviving for a reason and getting
mhm,
prospects to come play for them for a reason. But it is a very highlight driven league owned by a highlight company in overtime. So I can see why the fundamentals aren't there, but Notice how he says active, and it's him getting handsy. So it's not because he's not trying. It's just because he's trying to do too much and then getting lost. Like all the minuses that I'm reading there, I'm like, okay, this is send him to pop defense camp
Mm.
and that'll improve over a season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the defense doesn't scare me. The only thing that scares me is his size, Jude. But
Mhm.
honestly, I'm a guy that likes the Trey Young thing too, so I can't even say that without being hypocritical. So if he's everything that you're saying he is, I'm gonna go with you as always.
Maybe it's just my bias that I have for the overtime elite players, Ethan. But it's more his off the dribble scoring. He is an electric bucket getter who is starting to develop as a playmaker. I'm not even like that. That sentence lines up with all the tape I've watched on him. And if defense is the other thing he needs to get better at, I think this is like when we look at the guards on our team, we can teach them all playmaking and defense. You know what I mean? But if he comes in as another bucket getter, you know what I mean, next to Devin, that's going to take the load off Devin a little bit. It's going to take the scoring load off of other guys who are potentially having bad nights. And him in the pick and roll or the pick and pop, just in the two-man game with Wemby, I don't want to be redundant next to Devin, but I think that that would give us a lot of help offensively. And whatever defensive deficiencies he has, I think that other moves that we potentially make this offseason and other guys taking jumps, I think will nullify that eventually.
Mm. Only thing I'll say, and this will be pretty much the last thing I say probably, is that defense is still my number one priority. So if push came to shove, I'd probably take somebody that's higher or is better of a defender if they're available.
Totally get what you're saying. Okay, we're going to stop after 9 and 10 here.
Mm.
But here are Cody Williams, who is J Dub's little brother, and Zachary Rissache, shades of Michael Porter Jr.
Oh,
from the LNB Pro A in France. Connective piece on offense who could quickly learn a role as a two with his two-way versatility. He is a sniper. And then Cody Williams, dynamic finisher and a big playmaker with an impressive defensive toolkit. I think both of these guys, well, they play the same position, first off. So that's kind of why I paired them together. They're different. I would say that Zachary is more of a bona fide shooter. Where I still, in the Colorado games that I watched, I saw Cody Williams take some pull up jumpers and take some wide open catch and shoots. I'm not exactly sure what his percentage is. Um, Though he's never really shot well from three, there's hope for him. He shot about 80% from the line in EYBL. That's the big Nike league. 77% as a senior in high school. His older brother was also a late bloomer as a 3-point shooter too. So there
mm.
is some help there. But I have watched him like hit multiple threes in a game at Colorado. I believe it was actually against USC when he was playing Collier. I watched that game. So while that's still a question mark for him, where it's not at all a question mark for Zachary, um, there's a lot. I mean, look at the way that J Dubs looked and look at how he's kind of improved. I don't
Mm.
want to say that that's a guarantee that Cody Williams is going to have the same thing, but I see a lot of there's a reason they say shades of Jalen Rose. And I think there's a lot of I think he has a lot of upside. That's what I'm trying to get to.
I wouldn't mind it, especially if you think he can play the three spot and eventually, maybe not immediately, but eventually take that starting spot as a potential 3 and D guy. And if his upside is where his brother is, then absolutely 100% pull the trigger.
Yeah. And the more I'm looking at this, Ethan, even though he has Rasasher at number 10, dude,
You put him at
we,
nine.
dude, we not even that. I'm just realizing he fits our team really well.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
He does.
like Zachary Rasasher, if we could just put him at the three, and Wemby's talked about how much he likes him as well, that would. He's like Julian with like a 10 times higher ceiling, and he's coming in as an automatic sniper too.
Yeah. Yeah. He's immediately just an upgrade over Julian. As much as I love Julian, as much
Right.
as he made strides at the end of the year, uh, at 19 years old, to be 6'8", immediately a 3-point threat with all the toolkit to improve in every other facet of his game. Like, I'm with this pick for sure.
Alrighty, well, that will wrap up a little bit of our big board here. We could have gone longer or gone down the big board, but I think we were kind of what's the word? We've already been going for a while, and we just needed to wrap that part up. What I will do is scroll through this mock draft. In this unfortunate lottery that Kevin O'Connor did, the Raptors got the number one pick, so that sucks for us. And we ended up getting the sixth pick in this draft, and we actually picked Donovan Clingan. So you mentioned that scenario earlier, Ethan, and
Mm-hmm.
and here it is playing right out. I wouldn't be mad at it at all, but I just wanted to show this before we moved off of it, just to give an example.
I'm a prophet.